Picture a grand marble courthouse, packed to the rafters, the polished floors reflecting 1,000 anxious faces. One man stands at the center of it all. Alistair Van Crawford, billionaire, philanthropist, and media tycoon. Always used to having everything under control. He's here to defend a woman, rumored to be his secret mistress, who teeters on the brink of public scandal. But just when the tension peaks and Alistair's confidence seems unshakable, another figure steps forward. His wife, pregnant and determined. She speaks, and the courtroom buzzes with truth so explosive it could destroy everything. This is their story, full of secrets, betrayal, and an unthinkable twist. Alistair Van Crawford was a name that opened doors. At 52 years old, he was among the top 10 wealthiest people in the country, with a personal net worth rumored to be upwards of $4 billion. His father, the late Ernest Van Crawford, had built a shipping empire from scratch, but Alistair took the family business in a new direction, venture capital and media. He'd partnered in philanthropic efforts with Bill Gates chaired galas, where Oprah Winfrey was a guest of honor, and once appeared on a panel alongside Warren Buffett, discussing the future of technological innovation. These associations alone made him the subject of constant speculation. Yet behind the immaculate suits and carefully curated public persona, Alistair was an enigma. He was equally lauded and feared for his ruthless negotiation tactics. Unlike many high net worth individuals who preferred anonymity, Alistair craved the spotlight just enough to keep the Van Crawford name relevant and maintain an air of mystique. He married young 27 at the time to Guinevere Gwen Rothschild, heiress to a European textile fortune. She was beautiful, well-educated, and came from impeccable pedigree. Their wedding was a media sensation featuring hundreds of high society guests, including a personal congratulatory video from the late Princess Diana. For more than 2 decades, the Van Crawfords epitomized the perfect power couple. Behind closed doors, though, their life was far from perfect. Gwen longed for a more grounded existence, a quiet life raising children, perhaps running a charitable foundation or diving into philanthropic endeavors. She wanted to see the world in a more human, less corporate way. Alistair, however, was single-minded in his pursuit of empire building. Over time, that difference grew into a chasm neither could completely acknowledge. That wasn't to say Alistair did not love Gwen. He admired her elegance, intelligence, and gentle spirit. Yet as their fortune soared, she faded further and further into the background, seldom seen at public events. Rumors arose perhaps her health was failing, or maybe their marriage was on the rocks. But Gwen, never one to fan the flames of gossip, maintained her calm demeanor and stayed largely out of the limelight. It was around this time that whispers circulated about Alistair's rumored mistress, a vivacious socialite and aspiring actress named Serafina Delgado. She was 29, Spanish-Filipino by heritage, and had dazzled high society circles with her sultry beauty and effervescent wit. The paparazzi relentlessly hunted for proof of an affair, snapping pictures of Serafina on red carpets and scouring every inch of Alistair's calendar for overlapping engagements. Though no photo of the two together ever surfaced, the tabloids wouldn't let it go. Serafina Delgado, the woman who mesmerized a tycoon, screamed one headline. For a while the speculation died down, until a lawsuit erupted that placed Serafina in the crosshairs of a vicious media trial. In a stunning twist, Alistair Van Crawford publicly stepped in to fund her legal defense. With that single action, the rumor mill exploded. Was he the protective lover, or simply a benevolent magnate who pitied a friend in trouble. The truth, as it turned out, would be far more shocking than anyone imagined. The lawsuit in question centered on a bitter dispute over intellectual property rights. Serafina Delgado was accused by a rising film producer, Preston Mancini, of orchestrating an elaborate scheme to steal a movie script. According to the plaintiff, Serafina had used her charm to con him out of a nearly finished screenplay, one that was on the verge of securing a multi-million-dollar backing from a major Hollywood studio. The script, rumored to revolve around a scandalous romance set against the Spanish Civil War, had garnered buzz among cinephiles for months. Preston Mancini claimed that Serafina had coaxed a digital copy of the script from him with promises of connecting him to her powerful boyfriend, someone who owned both a media network and had extensive Hollywood connections. Though Mancini never mentioned Alistair by name in his official statement, tabloids quickly filled the gap. The powerful boyfriend had to be Alistair Van Crawford. The plaintiff's attorneys insisted that Serafina then used insider channels to pass the script to a competing production house, effectively leaving Mancini in the dust. Serafina denied every accusation, labeling them fabrications by a jealous opportunist. Despite her repeated claims of innocence, the public began to see her as a femme fatale, someone who used men for personal gain. Court documents revealed that Serafina's finances were in dire straits. She'd maxed out credit cards, faced eviction from a luxury apartment in Manhattan, and had borrowed substantial sums of money from various acquaintances. Enter Alistair. For years he had financed dozens of philanthropic and business ventures, rarely explaining his reasoning to the press. When he chose to back Serafina's legal team, publicly stating his confidence in her innocence, journalists had a field day. They cornered him outside Manhattan's West Side courthouse, vying for a quote. "Mr. Van Crawford, why did you decide to support Serafina Delgado's defense?" shouted one reporter. Alistair's jaw tightened, and his eyes flickered with the kind of quiet fury that signaled he was in no mood to indulge rumors. "The truth will prevail," he said curtly. "She deserves competent legal representation. That's all." His statement only fueled speculation. Gwen's absence spoke volumes. She was nowhere near the courthouse. For years, she had been a near-silent figure. Now her silence felt thunderous. Did she know about Serafina's alleged affair with Alistair? Was she complicit, or was she simply resigned in glitzy penthouses and Upper East Side cocktail parties? Insiders whispered theories. Some insisted Serafina really had duped Preston Mancini, while others argued she was being framed by powerful industry players. As Manhattan buzzed with gossip, a detective from the district attorney's office quietly dropped a hint to the press that the real story was even darker than rumored. Something about Serafina's ties to overseas funds and forged documents was teased, but no one had the complete picture. Meanwhile, Gwen stayed at their family estate in the Hamptons, pregnant with the couple's long-awaited child after years of fertility struggles. Very few knew about her condition, for she hadn't shown herself publicly in months. But in hushed circles, it was said that the strain of the ordeal was taking its toll on her. She was far from the naive socialite many pegged her to be. She was watching, learning, and quietly preparing for a moment no one else could see coming. Gwen sat by the windowsill of the Van Crawford mansion in the Hamptons, sipping peppermint tea. Once upon a time, the oceanic view brought her solace, but now it felt overwhelming, like a reminder of the endless waves of complication in her life. She stroked her belly, reflecting on the near miracle of this pregnancy. Doctors had told her it was unlikely, but here she was at 47, carrying a child she once thought impossible. She felt the baby kick softly, prompting her to whisper, "You're going to be okay, little one." She wanted to believe that. Despite her calm demeanor, Gwen was no fool. She had heard the rumors of Alistair's affair with Serafina Delgado. She had even confronted him once in private. His response was measured, deflecting any direct admissions. "She's a friend, nothing more," he insisted. But Gwen's instincts told her otherwise. Her personal assistant, Margot Blackwell, an old friend from her days in Switzerland, entered quietly with the day's mail. "There's a letter from your mother, and a few from philanthropic organizations, also some tabloids. I'm not sure you want to see them." Gwen offered a small smile. "You can place them on the desk." A flicker of sadness crossed her face. Headlines about the trial were impossible to avoid. Still, she accepted that knowledge was power. Margot paused, hesitation evident. "Are you planning on going to the city anytime soon? You haven't seen him in weeks." Gwen sighed. "I'll go when I need to," she replied cryptically. It wasn't that she was ignoring Alistair. She was giving him space to handle Serafina's case. Yet some part of her suspected something deeper was amiss, something Alistair wasn't telling her. Back in Manhattan, Alistair had turned an entire floor of Van Crawford Tower into a makeshift war room for Serafina's legal team. The lead attorney, Donovan Hall, was a high-profile litigator, known for being as expensive as he was effective. He and his associates pored over every piece of evidence that Preston Mancini's team presented, searching for weaknesses, holes, or any sign of manipulation. Serafina, for her part, performed exactly as Alistair wanted, contrite, cooperative, and utterly reliant on him for guidance. This was a stark contrast from her usual extroverted, flamboyant persona. Alistair saw her vulnerability and found it oddly captivating. He told himself he was simply protecting a friend, but deep down he knew it was more complicated. He was drawn to Serafina's desperation, a break from the unflappable perfection Gwen always displayed. At times he felt guilty. He had not told Gwen the entire truth. Their marriage had been a silent agreement. He provided financial stability and a certain social standing. She played the role of gracious hostess and unwavering partner. But love. Did they ever have it in the sense of passion, spontaneity, and vulnerability? Perhaps it was overshadowed by Deal's events and public image. In darker moments, Alistair wondered if Gwen's pregnancy was more an attempt to salvage their marriage than a spontaneous blessing. Then he would recall her genuine longing for a child she had yearned for it for years. Repressing his conflicting emotions, he pressed on, determined to secure Serafina's freedom. He told himself this had nothing to do with romance. Nothing at all. If only the truth were so simple. The first hearing in Preston Mancini's lawsuit took place in a packed courtroom on a rainy Tuesday morning. The media thronged outside, snapping photos of each arrival. Serafina stepped out of a sleek black limousine, her eyes shielded by oversized sunglasses, her lips painted a bold red. Alistair followed in a separate car, stoically pushing through the cameras. He refused to comment. Inside, Judge Rosalind Keyes presided, a no-nonsense judge who had seen her fair share of high-profile cases. She began with a simple directive to both sides. Keep your emotions in check. Court is a place for facts, not theatrics. Mancini's attorneys laid out their opening remarks, describing Serafina as an opportunistic siren who had taken advantage of a naive screenwriter's trust. They cited emails, text messages, and alleged recorded phone calls. While none of these were yet deemed conclusive, the drama they invoked set the mood. Donovan Hall countered with a crisp, methodical approach. "We have reason to believe these so-called correspondences are heavily doctored," he said, suggesting that Mancini was motivated by revenge for Serafina's refusal to engage in a personal relationship with him. Alistair, seated behind Donovan, nodded in approval of the strategy. So long as the defense could cast doubt on the authenticity of Mancini's evidence, they could keep Serafina's name clear for the time being. All the while, the public gallery was buzzing with many observers, trying to catch a glimpse of Alistair's reactions. Murmurs about Gwen's absence swept through the crowd. Would she show up to defend her husband's fidelity? Or was her silence confirmation of the rumors? After hours of back-and-forth arguments, the judge adjourned the session, scheduling a follow-up hearing to review newly submitted digital forensics. As Serafina and Alistair exited the courtroom, reporters bombarded them with questions. "Mr. Van Crawford, is your wife aware of your involvement? Miss Delgado, do you have any statement on these alleged emails?" Donovan expertly guided them into waiting cars without a word. Watching the television coverage in her living room, Gwen felt a pang of something she wasn't used to: resentment, perhaps jealousy. She had never believed in controlling Alistair or snooping into his affairs, but seeing him so publicly stand by Serafina brought a bitter taste to her mouth. For the first time, she felt overshadowed, replaced, and humiliated. Margot gently touched Gwen's shoulder. "You don't have to watch this." Gwen shook her head. "I should know what's happening," she said softly. She rubbed her belly, feeling another flutter of movement. She closed her eyes, deciding that she could not remain on the sidelines forever. This child she carried deserved more than a mother who quietly accepted half-truths and betrayal. She needed the truth, if only to protect the future of her family. Thus Gwen resolved to attend the next hearing. She would walk into that courtroom, face the reality of her marriage, and not let Serafina Delgado nor Alistair himself dictate the narrative any longer. While the media fixated on Alistair and Serafina, another figure entered the scene. Vincent Liu, a private investigator known for digging up secrets even the best lawyers couldn't unearth. Hired discreetly by Preston Mancini, Vincent was determined to find the smoking gun that would prove Serafina's guilt, or perhaps expose other skeletons in her closet. Vincent's investigation led him to Serafina's past, her upbringing in a modest suburb of Madrid, her move to Manila during her teenage years, then a sudden leap to New York's high society. There were whispers of a wealthy patron who had once financed her lifestyle, but none of the details were confirmed. Vincent's main objective was to see if her connection to Alistair Van Crawford was purely romantic, or if there was an underworld of financial impropriety linking them. Meanwhile, Alistair found himself juggling multiple crises. The stock value of Van Crawford Media took a slight dip amid the scandal. Shareholders began to worry about negative publicity affecting upcoming ventures, including a rumored streaming platform collaboration with major Hollywood studios. Alistair locked himself in late-night meetings with his CFO and PR team determined to mitigate any fallout. Serafina remained in her penthouse apartment, occasionally hosting late-night visits from Alistair's legal aides to go over her defense. Though outwardly stoic, Alistair felt the walls closing in. His father's old mantra played in his head: never mix business with personal matters. Alistair had done exactly that, allowing Serafina's predicament to become a corporate liability. He wondered if Gwen was quietly fuming. They had not exchanged more than a few text messages in weeks. One evening near midnight, Alistair paced his Manhattan penthouse suite. He stared out at the glowing city skyline, weighed down by a tidal wave of regret and confusion. Yes, he felt an attraction to Serafina, her vulnerability, her need for him. At the same time, he felt a duty, almost a longing for Gwen, who had been his loyal partner for over 2 decades. His future child with Gwen was supposed to be a new chapter, but now he couldn't envision how that chapter would begin if the trial ended in scandalous revelations. That same night, Gwen made her own decision. She dialed an old acquaintance attorney, Charlotte Howe, a woman she trusted implicitly. Charlotte specialized in marital and family law, but she also had a sharp mind for corporate litigation. Gwen's heart pounded as she explained her predicament. She was pregnant. Her husband was embroiled in a lawsuit defending his rumored mistress, and she needed to know her legal rights. Charlotte was sympathetic and reassuring, but she warned Gwen gently, if this becomes a bigger scandal, you may have to protect yourself and the baby above all else. Gwen ended the call feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. Her fingers trembled, yet she felt a newly discovered courage coursing through her veins. For so long she had been a graceful shadow in Alistair's life. She would remain gracious, certainly, but a shadow no more. A week before the second hearing, Alistair drove to the Hamptons unannounced. He arrived at the mansion shortly after dusk. Gwen stood in the foyer, her face a careful mask. Though her pregnancy was not yet fully visible, a gentle swell under her loose-fitting dress hinted at the future life inside her. Gwen Alistair began removing his coat. "I'm sorry I haven't been here much. Things have been hectic in the city." She offered a polite nod, stepping aside to allow him entrance. "I'm aware," she said quietly. "I've seen the news." An awkward silence followed, both of them acutely aware of the distance between them. Alistair cleared his throat. "How are you feeling?" "The baby." "Everything all right?" Gwen touched her belly, refusing to soften just yet. "We're doing fine. But Alistair, we need to talk." He braced himself, knowing she deserved answers. They moved to the living room, where the glow of a fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls. He recounted the lawsuit details, how he believed Serafina was being framed, and why he felt compelled to help her. Yet he never clearly denied having an affair. Gwen listened occasionally, pressing him for more specifics. "How did you meet her? Why this level of commitment?" But Alistair's replies were evasive, carefully framed. When he finished, Gwen looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Is there something you haven't told me?" she asked, her voice trembling. His hesitation answered her question better than any words could. "I can't explain everything right now," he said softly. "Trust me. I'm doing this for a reason." She released a shaky sigh, holding back tears. "Alistair, I've always given you the benefit of the doubt, but things are different now. I'm pregnant, and we're on the verge of raising a child. Secrets and half-truths cannot be the foundation of our future." Alistair reached for her hand, but Gwen pulled away, shaking her head. "I will be at the hearing next week," she said resolutely. "And I will decide for myself where I stand, where you stand." Though the night stretched before them, Alistair left soon afterward, citing early meetings. As the sound of his car engine faded into the distance, Gwen felt equal parts heartbreak and determination. She had seen Alistair's guilt in his eyes. He might think he was protecting her from something, but she suspected it was more about protecting himself and possibly Serafina. That evening, Gwen stared at old photographs of her and Alistair, their wedding day, their first Christmas party, a philanthropic trip to Africa. She remembered how gently he'd once held her hand during a safari ride, promising her they would one day travel the world without the constraints of board meetings and social obligations. They never did. Duty always overshadowed love, and now she wasn't sure if love was even alive between them. But she loved the child inside her. That love was her new guiding force, one she would defend no matter the cost. A crisp morning sun illuminated the grand facade of the West Side Courthouse, a stark contrast to the storm of controversy brewing within its walls. Security was tighter than usual, with uniformed officers guiding VIPs through a back entrance to avoid the throng of paparazzi at the front steps. Serafina arrived first, wearing a tailored black dress and a subdued expression. Donovan Hall. Her attorney ushered her quickly into the courtroom. Shortly after, Preston Mancini showed up, accompanied by Vincent Liu, who carried a black briefcase with an air of confidence. When Alistair finally walked in, the room buzzed. He took a seat behind the defense table. Cameras clicked like locusts in the press section, capturing every flicker of emotion on his face. Then came Gwen. She appeared at the entrance dressed in an elegant navy blue coat, her posture regal, her face resolute. One by one, heads turned, reporters nearly stumbling over each other to get a snapshot. A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. Gwen Van Crawford had arrived, and she was pregnant. Alistair stood in surprise, his eyes meeting hers. She offered a polite nod, but walked past him to sit quietly in the first row of seats. A subtle wave of empowerment rolled over Gwen. She no longer felt overshadowed. She was here to witness and possibly shape the outcome. Proceedings began with the judge's announcement. We will now review the digital forensic evidence regarding the alleged stolen screenplay. Mancini's attorneys presented a trove of emails and chat transcripts, purportedly from Serafina, seemingly confirming that she had solicited the screenplay. Donovan Hall objected, labeling the material inadmissible until authenticated by an independent expert. The judge granted Donovan's request, ordering a recess to allow an impartial digital forensics firm to examine the metadata. The tension in the room remained electric as the judge turned to Donovan. If these documents are proven authentic, your client faces serious legal repercussions. At that moment, Preston Mancini smirked, certain he had the upper hand. Meanwhile, Serafina's face paled, and she leaned in to whisper frantically to Donovan. In the gallery, Gwen couldn't help but observe Serafina's panic. She appeared genuinely terrified. Was this fear of being caught or fear of being framed? Gwen wasn't sure. Yet she noticed how Alistair reached out to gently squeeze Serafina's shoulder, a move both protective and intimate. The tabloids would feast on that image for days. When the hearing adjourned for lunch, Alistair approached Gwen in a corridor near the courtroom. I didn't know you were coming, he said, glancing around to ensure no reporters were eavesdropping. Clearly, she replied, chin raised. I needed to see everything for myself. He looked torn. Gwen, please believe I'm doing what I think is right. She paused, scanning his face. I believe you think that, she said, softly. But I'm not sure you realize the toll it's taking on us, on me, on our child. Before Alistair could respond, reporters swarmed them, cameras flashing. Gwen pulled away, refusing to be captured in an awkward standoff. She walked toward the exit, leaving Alistair standing alone, the echo of the camera's shutters capturing his silent regret. Later that afternoon, Vincent Liu sat in a nearby cafe sipping espresso. He had something new and potentially explosive bank statements revealing wire transfers from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands to Serafina's personal bank over the past year. Each transfer was substantial, tens of thousands of dollars at a time. The account holder was listed as AVC Holdings. While it wasn't a direct link to Alistair Van Crawford, those initials could stand for anything. The connection seemed too suspicious to ignore. Vincent typed a quick text message to Preston Mancini. I have a lead that could blow this case wide open. We need to talk." Alistair, meanwhile, returned to Van Crawford Tower, where he found Donovan Hall waiting. "We need to talk in private," the lawyer said. He led Alistair into a conference room. Once inside, Donovan's usually calm facade cracked. Mancini's team might have new evidence tying Serafina to questionable financial transactions. If they establish a link to you. Alistair's jaw clenched. "Let them try. AVC Holdings is a dormant shell I set up years ago for philanthropic endeavors overseas. It's not used for anything illegal." Donovan crossed his arms. "But were you funneling money to Serafina?" Alistair hesitated, scanning the room to ensure no one else was listening. "Yes," he finally admitted. "But it wasn't hush money or anything related to the screenplay fiasco. She needed help with her rent and some personal debts." He sighed heavily. "I've known her longer than I've let on. Okay. I've helped her in the past. If this gets out in court, it won't look good. But it's not illegal." The lawyer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Alistair, you're a high-profile figure. Any revelation of secret monetary support to a woman accused of theft, who's also rumored to be your mistress, could be catastrophic. Are you absolutely certain you have no direct involvement in the alleged screenplay theft?" Alistair shook his head. "I had no idea about this script drama until it blew up in the press. I was just trying to help Serafina get on her feet." Donovan stared at him for a moment, then exhaled. "This changes our strategy. We need to prepare for the possibility that Mancini's team will present these bank statements as evidence. If so, you might have to explain the nature of these transfers." Alistair ran a hand through his hair. "Do whatever it takes to keep me off the stand. This trial is about Serafina, not me." That evening, in the safety of her own suite, Serafina paced like a caged animal. She bit her nails, a habit she'd kicked years ago. She knew about the wire transfers. She had practically begged Alistair for them, citing medical bills for a family member. But now, all those hidden pleas for money threatened to paint a picture of a gold-digging mistress who manipulated a billionaire. She poured a glass of expensive brandy, courtesy of Alistair, and swallowed it in one gulp. Her mind wandered to Gwen, the pregnant wife who watched her in court with unwavering intensity. Serafina felt guilt gnaw at her guilt, that Alistair might lose everything, guilt that she was lying to someone who had done so much for her. But she told herself the same thing she'd told Alistair. She was innocent of this script theft. She just needed a way to prove it. A few days later, Gwen made a quiet visit to Charlotte Howe's law firm. She was ushered into a private conference room where Charlotte sat waiting. The attorney greeted her warmly, but dove straight into business. "Gwen, I've done some digging into Van Crawford Media's finances as well as public records. I have to ask, do you know about Alistair's involvement in a shell company called AVC Holdings?" Gwen shook her head, confusion evident. "No, I've never heard of it." Charlotte passed over a folder. "It's an offshore entity that's been funneling money to Serafina Delgado. We don't know the full extent, but we do know it's significant." Gwen's mind spun. She recalled Alistair's vague admissions about wanting to help a friend, but she never imagined the sums were that large. She stared at Charlotte with dawning clarity. Is he paying her for an affair? For her silence, Charlotte shrugged. It could be many things, but from a legal standpoint, if you want to protect your assets and the future of your child, you might need to establish a contingency plan. If Alistair is implicated in illegal activities, or if this trial goes south, Your financial security could be at risk unless you take steps now." Gwen bit her lip, feeling an unsettling swirl of anger and worry. "I don't want to assume the worst, but I won't stand idly by if my husband is lying to me about something that could jeopardize our child's future." Charlotte nodded. "I understand. We can draft a post-nuptial agreement or set up a trust to safeguard your assets, particularly any inheritance or personal funds you have. But if you want to go further, we can also prepare for separation or divorce proceedings, should that become necessary." The word divorce sent a chill through Gwen, but she maintained her composure. "Let's prepare the trust first," she said quietly. "I pray it won't come to divorce, but I need to be ready." After signing the necessary documents, Gwen left the firm with a heavy heart. She called Margot, instructing her to clear her schedule for the next several days. She needed to be in Manhattan, close to the action, close to Alistair. She refused to be a passive onlooker any longer. That same evening, Gwen unexpectedly arrived at the penthouse Alistair kept in the city. A startled butler let her in, and she headed straight for Alistair's office. He looked up from his desk, eyes widening in surprise. "Gwen, what are you doing here?" She closed the door behind her. "I need to know what's going on. Truly going on. I've been to my lawyer, Alistair." Her voice quivered slightly. "I know about AVC Holdings and the money you sent Serafina." His face fell, and in that moment, Gwen saw a flicker of something in his eyes. "Shame. It's not what you think," he said softly. "Then explain it to me," she urged, tears welling up. "Because everyone else has a version of the story, and I want the truth. Our child deserves that much." Alistair took a deep breath, gesturing for Gwen to sit. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and the confession he was about to offer would change everything. Alistair poured himself a glass of water, suddenly aware of how dry his throat felt. He motioned for Gwen to sit on the leather armchair across from his desk. She obliged posture, stiff arms protectively folded across her chest. He began, voice trembling slightly. "I met Serafina 6 years ago at a charity event for underprivileged youth in Madrid. She was the guest of another philanthropist. We talked about her dreams to become an actress, and I was drawn to her story. She grew up with very little, lost her mother at a young age, and was taken advantage of by unscrupulous men promising fame. We stayed in contact." Gwen's eyes were fixed on him, unblinking. "Go on." Over time, he continued, she would reach out whenever she was in dire straits. Medical bills for a sick relative, overdue rent. I helped her financially because I believed she was a good person who'd had a tough life. Perhaps I was naive, or perhaps I just wanted to feel like I was making a tangible difference. I've always cut checks for charities, but Serafina was personal." Gwen's voice cracked. "That's not the entire story, Alistair. You don't send tens of thousands of dollars to someone over and over without something else going on." He swallowed hard. "We grew close intimately. It was a mistake, one I regret deeply. But it wasn't just an affair. I genuinely cared about her well-being. I thought I was helping her build a life free of exploitation. Eventually, I ended the physical side of our relationship, but she was still financially dependent on me. I was stupid, Gwen. I handled it all wrong." Gwen clasped her hands together, trying to steady them. Why defend her in this lawsuit? Why risk everything now at this moment? Alistair sighed. "Because I believe she's innocent of these theft accusations. Mancini is desperate and wants to shift blame. Serafina has no real resources. Without me, she's doomed to lose. And if she's found guilty, She'll lose more than a legal battle. She'll lose any chance of a future. A silence stretched between them. Gwen felt a surge of rage, but also a strange pang of pity. She spoke, voice trembling. "You betrayed me. For years. And now you ask me to stand by you while you defend the woman you betrayed me with." Alistair bowed his head. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I've never stopped caring for you, Gwen. You've always been the one I come home to. Our child changes everything for me. I want to be better for both of you." Tears trickled down Gwen's cheeks. "Do you realize how humiliating this is for me? The press suspects your affair, and I, your pregnant wife, am made to look like a fool." He stood crossing the room in a few strides. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Gwen inhaled shakily. She was hurt, furious, and torn. "I'm not sure if I can keep doing this, Alistair. If Serafina is truly innocent, then this is bigger than my personal pain. But I can't ignore what you did to me." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I understand." For a brief moment, neither spoke. Somewhere in the distance, the hum of city traffic filled the silence. Gwen rose to leave, turning back only once. "You have one chance to make this right, if that's even possible. But if you lie to me again, I'm gone." And with that, she walked out, leaving Alistair to contemplate how he might salvage not just his marriage and reputation, but also his own fractured sense of honor. The trial resumed 3 days later, and the media circus had reached fever pitch. Rumors swirled that damning evidence against Serafina would be unveiled. In the courthouse lobby, Alistair, Serafina, and Donovan Hall braced for the worst. Gwen arrived separately, offering a curt nod to Alistair. She positioned herself in the front row, eyes hard, posture unyielding. Judge Keyes called the court to order. Preston Mancini's lead attorney introduced bank statements and wire transfer records, allegedly linking Serafina's finances to the theft scheme. As predicted, the name AVC Holdings featured prominently. The attorney hammered the point that Serafina's mysterious benefactor was none other than Alistair Van Crawford, and that these funds could have been used to bribe Hollywood insiders or pay for illicit access to Mancini's script. Donovan Hall objected, claiming speculation, but the judge allowed partial introduction of the evidence pending further cross-examination. All eyes turned to Alistair, who stared straight ahead, unwavering. Serafina looked on the verge of tears. When Serafina finally took the stand, the gallery leaned in. She testified about her relationship with Alistair, describing it as supportive, but carefully avoiding the term romantic. She insisted that she never saw or touched Mancini's script, let alone stole it. She claimed the wire transfers were acts of charity from a friend, not hush money. The prosecution pounced, hinting that a deep personal relationship existed between her and Alistair. Why would a billionaire repeatedly bail you out of financial trouble, they asked. Serafina fought to maintain composure. He is a kind man, she said simply, tears in her eyes. My mother always said that angels appear in unexpected places. The tension was palpable, but the biggest bombshell dropped when Preston Mancini himself took the stand. He produced a series of recorded phone messages, voicemails allegedly from Serafina, in which a female voice cajoled him to hand over the script in exchange for privileged introductions. The audio quality was grainy, but it sounded like Serafina's accent. Donovan Hall objected, questioning authenticity. The judge allowed a preliminary playback. The voice, albeit somewhat muffled, did indeed sound like Serafina. It was enough to crack her polished defense. Serafina's eyes filled with panic. She looked to Alistair, silently pleading. Alistair clenched his jaw. Was it really her voice, or had it been doctored? Meanwhile, Gwen observed everything, her heart torn. She knew Alistair believed Serafina's innocence, but this recording seemed damning. The prosecutor hammered the final nail. Miss Delgado, if you claim you've never heard or touched this screenplay, how do you explain these messages requesting a copy of it? Serafina's gaze darted around the courtroom. She whispered, I don't know. Her usually confident demeanor shattered. At that moment, Alistair glanced at Gwen. She was watching him carefully, searching his eyes for any sign he still believed Serafina unconditionally. Even if he did, the evidence spoke for itself. The judge declared the court adjourned for a lunch break, during which an independent audio expert would analyze the voicemail for signs of manipulation. Serafina practically collapsed into a nearby chair, Donovan by her side. Alistair stood, fists clenched at his sides. The media cameras swarmed them as they left the courtroom. One reporter yelled, "Is this the end for Serafina Delgado?" Another asked Alistair, "Do you regret defending her?" Gwen followed silently, grappling with her own question. What if the woman my husband loves is truly guilty? After the lunch recess, tensions ran high. The judge reconvened the session, instructing the jury and audience to maintain order as new evidence was presented. Both legal teams braced for the audio expert's findings. The expert, a middle-aged forensic analyst named Dr. Milena Park, took the stand. She testified that while the voice in the recording had a close vocal match to Serafina Delgado, there were anomalies in the background noise and speech pattern transitions. It's possible, she said, that segments of Miss Delgado's voice were spliced together from different recordings, then overlaid onto these voicemails. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. This was a pivotal piece of testimony. The prosecutor tried to discredit Dr. Park's analysis, but she remained steadfast. The technology exists. We call it deep faking audio. When done professionally, it can fool many people. However, certain forensic markers can reveal manipulation. Serafina exhaled in relief, tears sliding down her cheeks. Alistair's posture shifted, a hint of hope returning to his gaze. But the drama was far from over. Preston Mancini's legal team scrambled to salvage their case, suggesting Dr. Park had not analyzed the full original recordings. The judge, clearly irritated by the volley of claims, ordered a short recess to review the procedural guidelines for submitting such evidence. During that recess, Gwen Van Crawford made her move. She stepped forward, addressing the court's bailiff quietly. Within minutes, she was allowed to approach the judge's bench. Alistair watched, astonished. Serafina's eyes widened. The entire gallery buzzed with confusion. Gwen was not on any witness list. She had never publicly indicated she had testimony to offer. "I have information that may be relevant," she announced, voice steady, despite her trembling heart. Judge Keyes looked at her with curiosity. "Mrs. Van Crawford, are you prepared to provide sworn testimony?" Gwen nodded. "I am." Moments later, Gwen took the witness stand, placing her hand on the Bible to swear the oath. She glanced briefly at Alistair, who looked torn between anxiety and admiration. "What do you have to share with the court, Mrs. Van Crawford?" the judge asked. Gwen inhaled her voice, carrying a quiet authority that commanded the courtroom's attention. "I have reason to believe that certain parties, possibly Mr. Mancini or individuals linked to him, attempted to coerce Serafina Delgado into false admission of guilt. I received an anonymous package at my residence in the Hamptons, containing correspondence that suggests Mr. Mancini's willingness to fabricate evidence. A collective gasp rose among the spectators. Alistair's eyes widened. Even Serafina leaned forward, shock and gratitude mingling in her expression. The prosecutor jumped to his feet, objecting. "Your Honor, this is unverified hearsay. Mrs. Van Crawford is not an expert witness." Judge Keyes rapped her gavel. "Overruled for now. Let her finish." Gwen drew a breath, producing printed emails from her briefcase. Emails that spoke of a plan to frame the exotic socialite, referencing an individual known as PM, and instructions on how to create false audio recordings. These were delivered to me anonymously. I turned them over to my attorney for verification. Preliminary analysis indicates they are genuine, though I cannot say with certainty who created them. The entire courtroom was ablaze with tension. Serafina's jaw dropped, tears falling freely. Alistair stood stunned into silence by Gwen's bold intervention. He had no idea she'd received such damning evidence. Mancini shot to his feet, face contorted. "This is outrageous. She's forging documents to protect her philandering husband and his mistress." Gwen remained calm. "I assure you I have no motive to protect anyone but my unborn child. The only reason I have come forward is for the truth." The judge ordered immediate forensic analysis of the documents. She also issued a stern warning to Mancini's team about perjury and tampering with evidence. The case that once seemed stacked against Serafina Delgado now hung in the balance, with Gwen Van Crawford, pregnant wife, long-time bystander, holding the keys to the final outcome. The trial was put on hold for a week to allow forensic experts to scrutinize Gwen's documents. Speculation among the media ran rampant. Some outlets praised Gwen's bravery, painting her as a woman who rose above personal betrayal to champion justice. Others accused her of orchestrating a grand ruse to save her husband's reputation. Regardless, public opinion shifted away from the narrative of Serafina as a conniving seductress and toward the possibility that Preston Mancini might be the true villain. During the hiatus, Gwen took solace in her Hamptons estate. She tried to keep stress levels down for the baby's sake. Alistair visited once, but Gwen refused to see him. She left a note for Margot to pass on. "Give me time." Meanwhile, Alistair reached out repeatedly, leaving voicemails and sending text messages. "Thank you for what you did. I need to see you. I love you." But Gwen remained silent. Her focus was on her unborn child and the moral imperative she felt to reveal the truth. She was torn between her resentment over Alistair's affair and her renewed admiration for the man he once was, the one who championed the underdog and refused to be blackmailed by Mancini's lies. Back in Manhattan, Serafina was a bundle of nerves. She anxiously awaited updates from Donovan Hall. If Gwen's documents held up under forensic scrutiny, it would be a massive turning point in her defense. She found herself writing a heartfelt letter to Gwen, though she wasn't sure if she would ever send it. In it, she apologized for the affair, expressed gratitude for Gwen's help, and confessed that she'd always envied Gwen's poise and kindness. By the time Serafina set down her pen, tears stained the page. A separate storm brewed for Preston Mancini. Rumors circulated that he might face criminal charges for evidence tampering if Gwen's documents were verified. Vincent Liu, the private investigator, quietly distanced himself from Mancini, refusing to be dragged into any scandal that could cost him his license. Word on the street suggested that Mancini's Hollywood deals were collapsing, as studios wanted nothing to do with potential fraud. The day before court was set to resume, Donovan called Alistair to share the results the forensic team had deemed the emails provided by Gwen as highly likely to be authentic. Moreover, A small fraction of the email chain referenced a third party who specialized in audio editing, linking them to the suspicious voicemails. It was damning proof indeed. That night, Alistair stood on his penthouse balcony, gazing at the city lights. He held his phone, contemplating calling Gwen one last time. Instead, he typed out a text message. "I'm sorry for everything, but thank you for being who you are. I will always be grateful." He pressed send, unsure if she would ever respond. One thing was certain: tomorrow's court session would be the beginning of the end. Whether that end would be the redemption of Serafina Delgado, or the final unraveling of everything he once held dear, remained to be seen. The final day of the trial arrived in a flurry of camera flashes and urgent whispers. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and legal aides. Alistair and Serafina took their seats at the defense table. Preston Mancini, looking haggard and jumpy, sat across the aisle, flanked by his attorneys. Judge Keyes called for order. The prosecution reluctantly admitted the authenticity of the newly uncovered emails, though they claimed ignorance of any wrongdoing on Mancini's part. The judge, unimpressed, allowed Donovan Hall to introduce corroborating expert testimony, showing that segments of the voicemails were indeed pieced together from older recordings of Serafina's voice. Over a tense hour, the smoking gun that once threatened to doom Serafina unraveled as a carefully orchestrated fraud. Mancini slumped in his chair, beads of sweat forming on his brow. His lead attorney hastily tried to pivot, arguing that even if the voicemails were fake, the original script theft allegations still stood. But the momentum had turned against them. Without the voicemails, their case lacked the concrete proof needed to convict Serafina of wrongdoing. After a brief consultation, Judge Keyes dismissed the majority of Mancini's claims, citing insufficient credible evidence. The court hereby finds in favor of the defense on the primary allegations. Additional matters concerning possible evidence, tampering, and perjury may be referred to the district attorney's office. A hushed stillness, then an explosion of chatter. Reporters bolted for the exits to break the news. Serafina exhaled a ragged sob of relief, collapsing into Donovan's arms. Alistair closed his eyes, letting out a long, unsteady breath. For all the money he had spent, for all the sleepless nights, it was Gwen's intervention that turned the tide. Gwen was seated in the gallery, quietly observing the final moments. She saw Serafina stand, tears streaking her cheeks, and approach her. For a moment, Serafina hesitated, as if unsure if Gwen would acknowledge her. Then she spoke softly, voice quivering. "I owe you my life, Mrs. Van Crawford. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry." Gwen offered a small nod, her expression tinged with sadness. "I didn't do this for you," she said, her tone measured. "I did it for the truth and for the child I'm bringing into this world." Serafina nodded, eyes brimming with gratitude, and stepped away. As the crowd began to disperse, Alistair approached Gwen, scanning her face for any sign of reconciliation. "Thank you," he said softly. "You saved her. You saved all of us from a terrible injustice." Gwen's gaze flickered with an unspoken ache. "I did what was right," she replied, not quite meeting his eyes. "That doesn't erase your lies, Alistair." He nodded, his shoulders sagging. "I know. But please, Gwen, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. We have a child on the way. Our family." He paused, swallowing hard. "You and the baby are my everything now." She placed a hand protectively on her belly. "You'll need to prove that. Words won't be enough." And with that, she turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving Alistair to stare after her, filled with relief, regret, and the faintest glimmer of hope. In the weeks following the trial, Preston Mancini faced intense scrutiny from the district attorney's office. Evidence-tampering conspiracy to commit fraud, the charges piled up. His career in Hollywood was effectively over his finances teetering on ruin. Serafina Delgado found herself in an unanticipated spotlight, not as a thief, but as a woman wronged. Directors and producers, intrigued by her story, reached out with offers. Yet she turned them down, opting instead to retreat from the limelight. She wanted to leave behind the scandal and the rumors. She disappeared to an undisclosed European location, telling Donovan Hall she needed time to rediscover who she was without the crutch of Alistair's money. Alistair, for his part, publicly addressed the situation, offering a carefully worded statement that he regretted how personal matters overshadowed a quest for justice. He never admitted to the affair, nor did he deny it. The Van Crawford Media Board, sensing the shift in public sympathy after Gwen's heroic testimony, voted unanimously to retain Alistair as CEO, albeit with more oversight. At the Hamptons estate, Gwen remained cautious. She allowed Alistair to visit regularly for obstetric appointments and to discuss the baby's future. Their conversations were civil, occasionally even warm, but they carried a sense of fragile distance, like two dancers carefully navigating a delicate waltz. Charlotte Howe helped Gwen finalize a trust fund for the baby, ensuring financial security, regardless of any marital upheavals. Alistair supported this wholeheartedly, seeing it as a step toward regaining her trust. As Gwen's due date approached, she found herself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past months. She realized that while Alistair had betrayed her, he had also demonstrated a capacity for compassion, for unwavering loyalty in the face of adversity, even if it was misguided. She wondered if a man capable of both betrayal and deep empathy could be redeemed. She also questioned whether she could fully love him again, or if the affair's shadow would always loom over them. On a misty autumn morning, she went into labor. Alistair rushed to her side, holding her hand as she brought their child, a baby girl, into the world. In that moment, all the courtroom drama, the scandal, the heartbreak, everything faded before the miracle of new life. Tears streamed down Alistair's face as he whispered, "Thank you," cradling their daughter. Gwen, exhausted and emotional, managed a soft smile. "Welcome to the world," she murmured to the baby, her voice quivering with love and relief. That night, while Gwen slept, Alistair sat in a chair beside her hospital bed, gazing at their tiny daughter in his arms. He recognized how close he had come to losing the people who mattered most. He silently vowed to be a better man, someone worthy of both Gwen's respect and his daughter's adoration. Days turned into weeks, and the future remained uncertain. Healing would take time, and Gwen was not yet ready to forgive entirely. But in the hush of late-night feedings and the fragile coos of their newborn, they found small pockets of togetherness. The road ahead was filled with questions. Could their marriage survive this storm? Could love and trust be rebuilt from the rubble? Only time would tell. But as Alistair held his sleeping daughter, he felt that glimmer of hope again, because sometimes the hardest trials lead to the most profound transformations. And so ends the riveting saga of betrayal and redemption, proving that in the high-stakes world of wealth and power, the most profound drama unfolds behind closed doors. Alistair Van Crawford defended his mistress, risking it all, only to discover the true hero was the one he had most overlooked, his pregnant wife, Gwen. In a twist, no one expected Gwen's testimony changed everything, reminding us that love, courage, and unshakable integrity will always shine through the darkest secrets. But the story doesn't end here. Healing is a journey, and forgiveness is never guaranteed. Where do their hearts go from here? That remains unwritten. Call to action. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat through this tale of power, scandal, and loyalty, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll stay tuned for more gripping stories, dramatic twists, and the human journeys that captivate us all. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth always has a way of coming out in the end.